You're listening to the Storied Coaching podcast with Aaron J. Jacobs, episode number 93. This week, we're going to talk about what's causing the current male testosterone deficiency epidemic, as well as answers to the most commonly asked questions from men who are considering exploring testosterone therapy and if it's right for them. Forward.
What if you could rewrite your current story? How would you spend your time? What would your career or business look like? What kind of life would you design? Welcome to Storied Coaching, the podcast for high-performing leaders that provides you with tools and insights for building a thriving business that fuels an amazing life on your terms. I'm Aaron J. Jacobs, and as a master coach and the CEO of OMH Creative and Storied Coaching, I've had the privilege and opportunity to learn what it takes to rewrite your story. It's never too late for a rewrite.
Welcome to the podcast, everyone. This week, it's your friend Aaron. This week, we're going to talk about what I've indicated about last week on the podcast episode as far as the direction that we're going, and that's talking about hormone health, especially with guys. And I thought, what's the best thing for me to start off with as far as if we're going to do a double click into this, and if I was starting all over again, what was the stuff that I needed to learn right at the beginning that would have set my expectations for what is this? What are the most common questions that people have about this? And what are the do's and don'ts as far as maybe even starting to figure out where you go to get treatment and things like that? So that's what we're going to do today. All right. So anyone that's interested or has ever been passingly curious about like, what is testosterone optimization therapy? Some people call it testosterone replacement therapy. Sometimes they just call it testosterone therapy. Sometimes they call it HRT or hormone replacement therapy. There's lots of different terms and acronyms that people like to use. But for our purposes, we're talking about men specifically. So you're going to hear me talking about testosterone. That's the big one that men more and more are wanting to get into and are curious about, okay, where am I at? And is there a different version of me that can perform at a higher level, that will feel better, have less brain fog, have better sex, be able to have more energy, more motivation, and just for longevity, help me to just live a more full, wonderful, passionate life? And testosterone has been that thing for quite a few men, myself included. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So while we're talking through this, I'm basically just going to go through the guide that you can download that I created for people if you go to olympusmen.com. So if you go and check it out there on the website, this is actually a download, a PDF document you can do. But I thought I'm just going to walk through it for people so they know what's in it, and then I can answer some common questions. And then if you want to have it for yourself and you want to go download it, or you want to deep dive into one of the sections, because I won't be able to go through everything while we're talking today, because also that would be a boring podcast and I don't want to bore you, then you can just go and download it and do it that way. That way, some people like to read, some people like to listen, some people like to watch. There's different learning modalities, and this hopefully will be something a little bit for everyone. So first, let's talk about what's causing the current male testosterone deficiency epidemic. And I'm going to go ahead and call it an epidemic. There are some people that are coming out now and using the same words as well. And I don't like to be alarmist. Epidemic, like that has weight to it. It means there's something going on. This is more than just a trend in a few sample sizes of men. And man, even the study that came out just a couple weeks ago, and it came up in my feed again today, actually, that for microplastics, like one of those things, like they're just seeing how crazy distributed microplastics are in every walk of our life, including the food that we eat and including that we ingest and stay in our systems for basically forever sometimes. And they just did a study, and sorry if anyone's a little bit squeamish about this, but they just did a study on US men, and every single person in the study, every single man in the study had microplastics that were identified in their semen. Yeah, like it's literally inside of our testicles now. And we're starting to hear about all of the things that might be going wrong with guys having trouble conceiving, with lower testosterone levels, with different things that with the male endocrine system, the system that helps you with all of your hormone regulation and all the things that help you present as a man and that kind of thing, that these things all can be affected possibly by these microplastics. And it might be one of the reasons that we're seeing lower levels in men overall, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But it affects so many different areas of a man's life. And so that's why I think it's okay to call it an epidemic at this point, because more and more information is coming out all the time that's talking about the fact that this is not something that is just happening in a small part of the population of males. It's happening everywhere. So now to level set on this a little bit. So if you go into a doctor, to your general physician a lot of times, and you ask them to test your hormones, or just ask them in general, even if you haven't had a test yet, what is normal and what is average, there's a difference there, okay? Sometimes we interchange those two terms, average and normal. And I really want to be specific about the language that we're using here, because the average is what they usually tell you. So in the US male population right now, having somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 to 4, even 450, up to 500 maybe of testosterone, total testosterone level in men, and negaliters per deciliter. That's the measurement that they use. That's considered average. Now, the reason that they are using the word average there, and a lot of times they accidentally use the word normal, and I want to be, like I said, very specific here, is that the average has slid down since the 1950s. So in the 1950s, 60s, even into the 70s, that's when they started to notice things starting to go down, is in the late 70s. But anywhere between 800 and 1,200 were the numbers that most US men fell between when their testosterone levels were checked. Now, remember what I just said. Now they're saying that the average male is anywhere between 2 and like 500. And 500 a lot of times can be upper. There are always outliers outside of this where someone might have 800 or 850 or even 1,000, but they are outliers at this point. Most men do not test that high. And so the question is, what's happened since the 1950s, 60s, and then all of a sudden in the 1970s, late 1970s, 80s, 90s, and now that we're into the new decade or the new century, it's just continuing to trend down. 1 to 2% per year, it's ticking down. That average that they're quoting, if you go in and say, what's average for the US male, it keeps sliding down. Now, average is average. So they're doing a sample of all the men in the US, or they keep doing sample sizes, control sizes, and that is true. That is the average. But average doesn't mean normal. We've come to accept the fact that this average number is normal, but it's not normal that men are seeing this large of a drop, and especially in an evolutionary scale, this quickly. They are not sure what's causing this in men. It could be environments. It could be the fact that we talked about, like I just said, microplastics and things like that. It could be, it's basically, there's 3 contributing factors. So there's natural decline, and I want to be honest about that as well. There's a natural decline that happens with men as they age. Women too. We all talk about hormonal teenagers. Like, yeah, when you're a teenager and into your early 20s, even into your mid 20s, you have higher hormone levels, higher testosterone levels, because from an evolutionary standpoint, that's when, up until just very recently, that's when we were most fertile. That's when we were supposed to be having kids, was like really early on. Now I'm hoping that my kids waited a long time, and my wife and I waited as well to start our lives and start having kids until we were in our mid 30s as well. But from an evolution standpoint, it makes sense. Our hormone levels are higher during that time and during that stage of development. And then it drops off as you go. So as you get into your later 20s, into your 30s, your 40s, you're seeing a drop off, a certain percentage each year as you get into your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And then it basically, when you're getting to your 40s, your late 30s, your 40s, you're seeing a pretty significant drop. But the thing is, that's natural. But it's dropping even faster than that, even faster than it should. We're seeing in those kids those guys that are in their 20s, that are even in their late teens, they have testosterone levels that should be much higher. And so it's not just affecting guys in their 40s or their 50s. It's starting earlier and it's dropping faster. And that's what's concerning. And the more I learned about this, the more I realized that, okay, yeah, there's over your course of history of man and of our lives as men, we're going to see a little bit of a drop off. Now, even if there weren't external environmental factors, being the person that I am and wanting to be a high performer, if there's a way for me to maintain higher testosterone levels, because higher testosterone levels have been shown and proven to actually be more cardioprotective, to help you with muscle retention as far as your body composition. And they have shown all kinds of studies that show the longer you can maintain a higher percentage of muscle mass in your or in your life, the more longevity you have. Because we've all seen those people as they get older and they stop being active, they just go downhill so quickly. They become what we associate with age, which is frail. And the last thing you want is to be frail. And in order to be a high performer, and even just seeing what naturally goes down, I would be looking to optimize, because of the fact that if I can control that and it's easy for me to do and it's affordable, why would I not? Why would I not want my testosterone levels to be, for my body specifically, find the sweet spot for that of where I was in my early 20s or where I could be in that age range? Why not maintain that for as long as possible? Especially with all the health benefits that go along with it. So that would be the way that I feel as a high performer. And there's a lot of guys that agree with me. If this was just natural, but the fact that it's dropping off at such a huge rate, and that men are never achieving those peak levels in the first place, means that a lot is getting left on the table as far as developmentally for kids as they're getting older, especially when they get into that late puberty stage and they're going into their 20s and on. They should be able to reach their genetic potential. And for a lot of guys, that's directly correlated with their testosterone levels. And if they're not able to get there, then the same thing that I do, then they're not able to actually fulfill what they might be able to do, whether that's in the gym or whether that's if they're a runner or whether they're physically active but testosterone is a lot of times tied to those physical factors and to male characteristics and traits like beard and hair on your body and things like that, and deeper voice, but it also contributes to so much more. For men, having testosterone levels in the sweet spot for you as an individual means that your thinking and your energy levels and your sex drive and your performance in and out of the bedroom are all tied directly so much to this factor that if it's out of balance or not where it could be, the rest of your life suffers for it. And you can start to accept that's your new normal. And I don't want any of the men that I know, especially friends and family members in my life, to accept that as their normal, because their life can be so much better. They don't have to wait. They can absolutely start addressing these kinds of things now. Now, I said there were three major factors, and the first one I already talked about, and that's natural. As we age, it's going to drop off a bit. Totally fair. You might want to optimize anyway, even if you didn't have these other two. But the fact that I touched on this a little bit, microplastics, environmental factors in modern living, obesity and sedentary lifestyles, definitely need to touch on this here. Especially with us US males, there's been a lot of couch potato action happening as time has gone on. More watching of TV, less exercise, more eating of processed foods, things like that. Those processed foods and the way that we eat and the way that we take care of ourselves may have a direct correlation with higher fat percentages, especially to more estrogen production and less testosterone production. So that can be a contributing factor as well. And we've all seen those studies about like how as US especially, like we always are on that chart we don't want to be in the top percentile of, but we constantly are, which is unhealthy weight. And so that can be contributing to this as well. Stress and mental health problems. Stress definitely is something that affects your testosterone levels as a male. Your testosterone levels go down when you are highly stressed. It has a repressive characteristic to it when you are under stress. Psychological long-term stress likely to lead to reduced testosterone levels. They have studies that show this. So there's that as well. And with our modern lifestyle and how we are on all the time, and we have these things in front of us, these square devices, they're with us everywhere, whether you're Apple or Android or whatever, you're constantly on email, you're constantly at the beck and call of working and things like that. It's just a constant go society. And they're saying that stress and that constantly being on may have something to contribute to this as well. And then external toxins. Like I said, that was the one I was talking about, microplastics, which is just one thing, but it's grown so much. The production of plastics, it's gone from 50 million to 300 million tons since the 70s. It's crazy to think that's not somehow connected, because we are eating and breathing and absorbing these things on a daily basis. They're in our water supply now. They're just small pieces of plastic that are just everywhere. And we don't know what the long-term effects of that are going to be. And this might be one of the short-term effects that we're experiencing right now, because they do contain endocrinological disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. And they're in all kinds of stuff, like the plastic bottles we drink out of so much, those water bottles, food storage containers, liners of metal food cans, detergents. There's all kinds of stuff that these chemicals, as well as the microplastics, are found in that could be contributing towards this. And that's what I wanted to say too. It's not like just playing the blame on one thing that we're doing lifestyle wise. It could be an amalgam of lots of things, especially when you're talking about environmental factors. And then the last thing is just really going to be us as a society having all three of those things tied together: the external toxins, the stress and mental health problems, the obesity and sedentary lifestyles. When you start putting all those together, it comes up with a formula that may be what is causing the specific large and fast decline in testosterone levels in men. Now, I've had a lot of doom and gloom as far as here's all this stuff that's happening. And yes, I'm using the word epidemic because I think it's appropriate here. And I don't think enough people are talking about it, especially men. It might have a little bit to do just with education, and it's just not out in the zeitgeist right now. It might have to do with the fact that testosterone, when people start talking about taking testosterone, they immediately think that you're talking about like a bodybuilder, like taking a bunch of steroids or something like that. This is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is making it so that your testosterone levels are high normal, to the point where you're optimized. And that means different things for different guys. Someone might feel amazing at 800, and someone might at that same level feel like garbage. Conversely, someone might feel amazing and have perfectly great health markers at 500, but someone else that is at 800 still needs to go up to 1,000 in order to feel the same way that person at 500 feels. So there's a bio uniqueness to this as well. That's why you want to work with a medical professional, to be able to really do your lab work, do your blood work, do your testing, find out where you're at right now, and then help you dial it in little by little until you find the perfect spot for you hormone wise, where you're feeling your best. You feel like motivated, you're feeling energy, you don't have the brain fog anymore. Your sex drive is right where you want it to be. Your mood and all that kind of stuff. Depression, anxiety is no longer really something that you worry about. All of those things. One of the things, just to go side tangentially here for a second as well, is I was just reading a study about the fact that they're noticing that men that, because there's a larger sample size now of men, because this is becoming more of a thing, that men are going on testosterone therapy, that they're noticing that there is a trend of men, once they go on testosterone therapy, that if they were already on SSRIs, or antidepressant drugs, some more commonly known, like Effexor and Wellbutrin, things like that, that once they go on testosterone therapy, they're finding a very large trend where a lot of them are able to completely drop their SSRIs, their antidepressant medications, their anti-anxiety medications. They just feel balanced. They don't feel like they need it anymore. And for some guys, these are guys that have been dealing with depression, like clinical depression, their entire lives. And this is something that they never knew to look for, or that might be something that could help them, cure them as far as that's concerned, and to lead a much happier life. And I just love hearing that, because men's health, a lot of the things that I've paid attention to as well, besides prostate health and how they do that, the mustache thing every year with the prostate health and the Mo members, November. But tied closely to that is mental health for men as well. Like depression and anxiety, they're all-time highs for guys, and suicide rates too. And if by balancing your hormones helps save lives that way, if that could be connected to that, wow. What an amazing thing that you could be gifting to yourself and to all the men that you know, if that is something that you could do. Also, so much more affordable than, oh my gosh, those SSRIs and drugs and stuff. As someone who has been on those for a long period of time in my early 20s, when I was going through clinical depression and dealing with anxiety, as I have throughout my life, I can tell you that I have never had as long of a stretch that I'm having right now since I've got that happen to me, since I've gone on testosterone optimization therapy. I have not had those. It doesn't mean I don't have bad days anymore. Everybody has bad days. Everybody has things they get anxious about or that they worry about, but it's common stuff for me now. It's more normalized. It's not huge bouts of things that can feel crippling to someone that's going through clinical depression or to having anxiety attacks, things like that. So there's just so many different things that hormone levels are tied closely to for men's mental health, especially testosterone. That's really one of the reasons that I think if you are if you're in your mid 30s and above, there's no reason to not have at least your labs done. It costs a couple $100. You can do it like through a clinic like ours, or you can, go and do it independently as well. And just see where your testosterone levels are at. See where your prostate health is. See where there's so many things that you can find out by getting your blood tested, as well as your hormone panel, but finding out exactly where your cholesterol is, all that stuff. Being more in control of it is so much better to have preventative medicine than having to do sick care. Once it's already a problem, us guys have the worst reputation for that. We wait until the wheels are coming off the bus and then we go to the doctor once there's a problem. And if you're getting blood work done more regularly, you can head stuff off when it's easy, when it's easier, when it hasn't gotten big yet. If we're talking about prostate health and prostate cancer and things like that, there's actually precursors that they can see in your blood before it becomes a thing. So this is something really good to get in the habit of doing. So there's no reason to not spend a couple $100, go get your labs done, see where your testosterone levels are, and then see if there's an opportunity to adjust your hormones because of the fact that you might be feeling okay right now. You might be feeling good even. And I had a person actually use this example for me at one point, and I was like, oh, I had never really thought about that way. And it was, what if what you think your life is right now, if someone asks you like, hey, from 1 to 10, what's your life at right now? And you're like, oh, I'm feeling pretty good. I think my life's an 8. I'm feeling really awesome. My mental health's pretty good. Feeling good physically. Yeah, I'm at an 8, if not a 9. Like, I'm feeling good. And then you found out that actually, by having your hormones adjusted, that there's actually, that chart goes to 20. It doesn't go to 10. So yeah, you're at an 8. But did you know that by adjusting your hormones, that you could be sitting at an 18 or a 19 or God forbid a 20? What if the scale for the way that you feel, for your sexual health, for the kind of training that you can do, the muscle mass that you can put on, the brain fog, the high performance as far as mental activities, physical activities, your mood, all of these things, your blood markers. What if by starting hormone therapy, that there's a whole unlocked version of you that you don't even know about yet? Isn't that fun to at least think about? That's pretty cool to think that there's a possibility that like, yeah, you feel okay now. Or maybe you're one of those guys that like I was, where it was like, I just wasn't getting really poor results. Like it was wheels were coming off the bus a little bit. And then all of a sudden, within 6 to 8 weeks, I had crazy changes as far as my mental health, my physical health, my attitude, my overall outlook on life. It was crazy. So that is why I think that most men should at least have a blood work done and see where you're at. It just doesn't hurt. And some of the questions that I get when people ask me about testosterone therapy, because this is always what happens. Someone will find out, especially now, because I'm talking about it a lot more, they'll come up to me, maybe not in mixed company, but guys will peel off once they're maybe a couple steps away from their wife, or maybe once we're outside of a group, if we're in a large group of guys, because it's still a little bit of an uncomfortable thing to talk about as far as hormones and things like that. It's private information to some people, but they'll ask me what it's like, and they'll ask me very specific questions, because us guys like to get tactical, right? Like, how exactly does it work? Exactly. Show me the deployment plan. And one of the questions I get a lot is, because there are different ways to take testosterone, but the most popular way to do it, and the one that's most cost effective most times, is through injections. And so you use usually a smaller needle. It's diabetics that use 1/2-inch needles for doing their insulin multiple times a day. It's the same thing. It's the same size that you can use. And they want to know, hey, does it hurt? And I have to say that I was the exact same way. I absolutely do not like needles all that much. And I was a little sweaty about it the first time that I did it. And I was like, oh, am I going to do it right? Am I going to kill myself or something? And the answer is no. You're taught how to do it correctly by your clinician or by your coach, your health coach, if you're going to a clinic like ours, and you're shown exactly where to do it and how to do it. And you're going to be a little bit nervous the first time. Everybody is. It's a syringe. And like most of us don't like syringes. Perfectly normal. If you're like me when I was a kid, I was like, it was the worst thing ever. Like they had to hold me down to get my shots, my measles and my shots and things like that you would get when you were a kid, and your vaccinations to go to school and things like that. But I have to say, I felt so silly after the first time that I did it. I was like, that's it? It doesn't even hurt. And that's still a valid question that I get from guys. And so I want to call it out. So they want to know, does it hurt? And I'm like, Matt, maybe you feel a little bit of a pinch the first few times, but after that, it's just like brushing your teeth. You just do it. Most guys are on a schedule, at least the ones that we prescribe in our clinic. You're able to keep steadier blood levels and hormone levels if you do it twice a week, basically. So usually guys do it like on a Monday and a Thursday. They'll have a schedule like that, about 3.5 or 4 days apart. And so you just do it as part of your morning routine twice a week. It takes all of 30 seconds to a minute to put it in the syringe, to draw it up after you learn how to do it with the alcohol swab and all that stuff and inject. It's not that big of a deal. If you talk to anybody who, for instance, is a diabetic and has to do this all the time, they're like, come on, please, this is not hard. There are people that live with all kinds of things that have to do this and have had to deal with since they were a kid. This is not as big of a deal as you probably are making it out in your brain if that's one of the things you're thinking about. But I have to say, I was totally sweaty about it the first time as well, so you're in good company. So that's the first thing that I usually tell people is that, yeah, you feel a little bit of a pinch. You might have a little bit of muscle soreness where you inject it the first couple of times, but even your muscle gets used to that very quickly. And now, like after the first couple of weeks, first few shots, it doesn't even get sore anymore. So it's not really something you have to worry about. And that's something we work with people with to make sure they know how to do it and all that kind of good stuff as well. The other question that I get, which I also just talked about, was how often do you have to do it? And the answer is 2 times a week. There are some doctors that still recommend that you do it like once a week. And even some doctors that I've heard of that I'm guessing that it's very well intentioned. They're just not endocrinologists and they don't run a hormone clinic, but they will say to do it once every 2 weeks. And that's what we have found is that means you feel really great for the first week or the first half of the first week, but then your levels drop between that first and second week. And then they drop to the point where we call it, there's peaks and troughs, and you're so far into the trough at that point that you feel crappy, like for at least the second half of the second week. So definitely weekly, but 2 times a week is what I recommend. And that it's not me recommending it. It's what most professional clinics recommend at this point that are doing hormone replacement therapy, is twice a week. So that's what I'd like to set people's expectation for, is this something you're going to have to do twice a week in order to get your levels and to maintain them once you figure out with your doctor, with your nurse or your clinician, exactly where you want them to be. So that's really all you have to worry about. And like I said, it gets so boring. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't even think about it anymore. So the next question is always like, when does it kick in? That's what they want to know, is like, how long before I can start feeling the effects of this? How long before I'm starting to get some of these absence of brain fog and more energy and more motivation and better results in the bedroom and better libido and my workouts are more effective? Like, when does all this stuff start? So there's a really great graphic we use in the guide for this that actually is probably a wonderful one to refer to, which I'll walk through here right now. But I'll just walk you through a little by little of what you can expect through the first 12 months. And I'm going to skip around a little bit here. But week 1, like, you're not going to feel a whole lot different. You might have a little bit of improved insulin sensitivity, as far as you won't have insulin peaks as much with food, which, again, a lot of guys that go on testosterone replacement therapy, they lose quite a bit of belly fat. They lose quite a bit of unwanted weight, because it helps you with your metabolism and improves your insulin sensitivity, which means your body holds on to less stuff and you're able to maintain more of a lean physique much easier. You remember how much easier it was when you were a teenager and in your early 20s, how you could crush a pizza and still bounce back? Yeah. Not so much when you're in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, huh? Yeah, exactly. So you might have some small instances of bursts of energy and things like that as well that first week. But a lot of times it's still building up in your system. And it really is through those first 6 weeks, it's building up to the point where you're at a steady level. Okay. So by week 3, you're probably noticing some improved sex drive, which no one's going to complain about there, whether you're a guy or whether you have a partner, a girlfriend, boyfriend. They're probably going to notice as well. More sexy times. You're going to want more sexy times. Reduced anxiety and aggression happens there a lot as well. Like I said, a lot of guys feel less anxious once those levels start to get balanced out. Improved social life and social interactions. And what that usually comes down to really is confidence. If you are feeling your best and you're feeling much better, you are having improved social interactions because of the fact that you feel more confident. And guys that maybe feel a little bit more timid, things like that, that is something that they've anecdotally reported back, that they feel more confident in social situations, which that's never been something that's really been a problem for me, especially obviously with the past in theater and things like that, like getting up in front of crowds and something like that, something I enjoy. But for other guys, they have reported that, which I think is really interesting and a pretty amazing benefit. By week 4, you're having improved lipid profile, which is pretty amazing to be able to see that quick of a difference in your blood work. Decreased triglycerides as well, and cholesterol. So this is actually helping your cholesterol levels, which guys that are my age in your late 40s and going into your 50s and things like that, and some guys have to deal with it earlier than that. If triglycerides and cholesterol levels and things like that are something that you've had to watch or be concerned about in the past, this is something that's actually going to, studies show, help with that, which is pretty amazing. And then you'll have by week 4, usually guys are starting to report that they're having a significant increase in erections and sexual performance. I still sometimes get a little bit red when I talk about this stuff. Isn't that so funny? Social conditioning is such a funny thing. If you're watching this right now, you might see me blushing a little bit. But yeah, this is stuff I want to talk about, so got to talk about it out loud. We're all adults here. So they're noticing that, which is something that every guy, we might not want to talk about out loud in a group, but that's something every guy hopes that he has. He hopes that he's maintaining some pretty great erections and that sexual performance is on the rise, pun intended. By week 6, I can't believe I said that. By week 6, there's a complete turnaround for mood a lot of times. So week 6 is like I said, where we're getting to peak serum levels between 6-ish weeks. So you could have a complete turnaround as far as mood by that point. Like just the sun has come out, the clouds are no longer obscuring it. If you were having some of those depression, anxiety issues, mood stuff, grumpiness, all of a sudden guys are like, oh my gosh, I wake up feeling like $1 million. Increased overall mood and mental clarity, decreased depression and stress, and cortisol levels drop as well, which is your stress response. You're able to handle stressful situations better, which is pretty amazing. But now I'm going to jump. So that's the first 6 weeks. As far as after that, you're getting to 3, 6 months, 12 months. By the 3-month mark, you're having better glycemic control. So again, your blood's looking better and better. Decline in high blood pressure a lot of times. It just goes on and on. If you are on high blood pressure medication, there is a possibility that you'll be able to lessen the amount that you're on, if not stop it altogether. Which is crazy to me that this affects so many different areas of men's health. Also noticeable changes in muscle content by that point. So if you decide once you start doing testosterone therapy within those first 3 months to maybe start that habit that you've been wanting to do of getting back in the gym more, of exercising on more of a regular basis, you're going to see results faster because the testosterone levels help support recovery. So you're able to push yourself and see results faster, which I don't know if you're anything like me, but most guys that are like me, if you're a high performer, once you start seeing results, it just reinforces that you want to keep doing it. It's when you have been going to the gym for 3, 4, 5, 6 months and you feel like you're not seeing any differences except just beating yourself up. That's when you start to say, the heck with this, I just can't do it. So being able to recover and be able to go to the gym and then be able to see results really reinforces you continuing to do it, which also leads to an overall healthier lifestyle, which is just a fantastic thing to be reinforcing. That's 3 months. Once we're jumping to 6 months, increased bone density, it's harder to break you now. It's harder to break you. You're becoming superhuman. So increased bone density, greatly improved mental health from exercise, sleep, food, etc. A rise in your PSA levels, which is also connected to this as well. So you're going to be able to have levels for your prostate that are much more healthy, which is wonderful. Us guys, prostate health and making sure that we're staying on top of that. Very important for us. We don't want to have the big C happen. We don't want that cancer. So anything that helps us in that department is a positive. And by the time you are at the year mark, at that 12-month mark, your prostate specific antigen and volume rise is locked in. Your overall changed mood and mentality. You're quicker on decisions and critical thinking as well. Like when they tested guys before and after they've been on for a year or more, like they're able to actually cognitive function wise be able to perform better. So I hate to use something that sounds childish, but it really does. Sometimes I think about it. I'm like, this is like the super serum that Captain America got. It's just, there's so many positive effects of getting your testosterone levels when you're a guy dialed in to where they're best suited for you, that I have trouble seeing downside. Now, there are always outliers. So for some guys, they might try testosterone therapy and it's not for them. I have heard a couple stories about that, but honestly, I haven't seen any data backing it up where it's ever been a problem for a man. I've definitely seen where maybe they went too high at first and needed to dial it back down. And so they had a little bit of higher hormone levels or higher estrogen levels at first. They needed to then go ahead and dial down a little bit to get in balance. But that's all manageable when you're working with a doctor or a nurse or a clinician, because they're monitoring your blood work. Not just getting it once, you're getting it at certain intervals. And so they're able to monitor it and adjust it accordingly for your specific body type. So now the other question that we get a lot, and again, I'm just being very frank with you, is, are my balls going to shrink? And you know what? There's that old wives' tale out there that's guys that are on testosterone, or I think it came from more like steroid culture, like more wrestlers and stuff like that they were on steroids and all this stuff, and that their testicles would shrink. And while there are some studies that show that happens sometimes, it's called testicular atrophy, if we're talking about it in the medical terms. And it's not something that affects many guys. If it is something that happens to you because of the fact that you are getting testosterone introduced to your system now exogenously. And what that means is you are providing your body with testosterone from outside the body into your body. And so your body is really smart. It's this amazingly well-developed system when it's working correctly. And it knows that, hey, if I'm getting testosterone elsewhere on a regular basis now, body, we don't need to produce as much of it at such a fast rate anymore. And so sometimes for some guys, that might mean that there's a little bit of testicular shrinkage because of the fact that the factory doesn't have to be running at peak performance anymore. Now, this is super easy to avoid or reverse. In fact, our clinic just preemptively does it. You're provided with a supplement that specifically addresses this. And it basically tells your body like, hey, no, go ahead and keep the boys full, large, and in charge. Don't lower production just because we are introducing testosterone on top of what the body's already producing. So that dispels that usually for people right away. So I can see why guys would be concerned about it. Of course, I would think about it as well. I want to know these things. If I'm going to go ahead and commit to doing something like this and look into doing hormone therapy, I want to know what the effects are as far as, come on. So that's the answer to that one. That's a big one. And I even thought about maybe not talking about that on the podcast. Again, we're getting pretty up close and personal here. But one of the reasons that I wanted to do this was to go ahead and face some of my own like possible short-term embarrassment about talking about this stuff in a public forum, but do it because of the fact that more guys need to know about this. And they need to know about the fact that a lot of these things, these rumors are not true and they get passed around. It's that thing that we've heard a million times, which is a lie will be able to travel around the world 3 times while the truth is still getting their shoelaces tied. And so I just want to dispel these kinds of unhelpful myths about what that might keep guys from exploring this if it's something that's going to help them. Okay. So those are some of the big questions that we get there. Now, the other one that I get a lot is, how do I know? What are the common signs of, as we refer to a lot of times, low testosterone? And usually there's a checklist that if you're going to a testosterone clinic like ours, or there's lots of them out there, that there's usually a checklist of questions that they'll ask you. And these are the ones that align with that. So if you are experiencing a combination of even just 2 or 3 of these grouped together, it a lot of times means that, hey, you should definitely have your blood work done just to see where you're at. And then you can make a choice from there. But those common signs, you might want to grab a pen for these. Those common signs, or this is in the guide as well, are loss of muscle mass, less strong erections, lack of sexual desire, lack of energy, low motivation, weight gain, brain fog. Oh, I can tell you I had so much of that brain fog. I didn't even realize how bad it was until I got on testosterone therapy, and it was just magically gone after 6 weeks. Anxiety, depression, two of the big ones that I dealt with. A decreased enjoyment of life in general, sad and or grumpy most of the time, deterioration of work performance, poor sleep, joint pain, and a decrease in strength and or endurance. So those are the big common signs that tend to be flags that if we group just several of them together, it's worth it to go ahead and at least have your labs done. It's a quick blood draw, and they'll have the results back to you usually within 5 to 7 business days. And then you can see where your levels are at. And then you can make a decision from there, what you want to do. But as I was ticking through that list, I bet there are quite a few of you that were like, yeah, ooh, that one too. Yes. So this is a lot more common, like I said, throughout the male population than we're talking about. And it's something I want us to talk about openly. We're getting better, men in general, about talking about our mental health, which I'm very happy about. It's one of the reasons I became a coach, was to try and drag some of that stuff out into the light, to talk through things, to be able to, that's why I started Storied Coaching, was so that you would be able to analyze the stories in your life, the stories, the really powerful ones, especially that we think over to ourselves over and over again, and become kind of the blueprint for our life, for ill or for goodness. But this is a huge component of it as well. The chemical makeup of your body has a huge influence on the way that you feel and the way that you think and the way that you perform and the way that you move through life. And if there is a simple, affordable way to be able to adjust your testosterone levels and your hormone levels so that you can live a better life from now on until your end of days, why would you not be exploring that? Honestly, and I'm not the only guy that has said that. I've heard so many guys say the same thing that have gotten on testosterone therapy. They just wish they had found it years sooner. And I feel the same way. I probably could have used this in my mid 30s. And I'm super happy that I found it at the age of 43. Yeah, at 43. But man, if I had found it at 35, I think I would have enjoyed my late 30s and my early 40s a lot more. If I can help any guys not miss that window and get tested earlier, so that they can live better lives starting now, that is absolutely the mission that I'm on. Now, the last thing that guys a lot of times want to know is, what's testosterone made from? Is this some weird chemical that like has all kinds of bad effects or something like that? Is it made in some like weird lab somewhere or something like that? Some unholy alliance of chemicals? And the answer is no. Do you know what it's made from? It's mostly made from yams. I bet you won't look to a sweet potato the same way ever again. But it's made from yams or soy, mostly. So it gives a whole new definition to those guys that like to call people soy boys. It's actually, soy is one of the best things that you can make testosterone from. And it's bioidentical testosterone. And what that means is it's completely organic because they're taking it from organics. And it's bioidentical. The body cannot tell the difference between this stuff, bioidentical testosterone, and the stuff that your body naturally produces. It is identical. It is an identical, bioidentical match. And the cool thing is that it's gotten to the point now where they're so good at making it from these natural sources that the cost has come down so much. This is not something that's out of the reach for most normal men. You're able to get on testosterone therapy. It is the cost of a lot of times what people just pay for their Starbucks bill each month. And they have everything that they need in order to live a completely different life. So that's what I wanted to work through with you guys today. I just wanted to knock out of the way some of these things that have come up with people as far as frequently asked questions, why it's happening, what are some of the reasons of like why I'm talking about it, why all of a sudden, if you go into a doctor, they might tell you you're average and you're like, oh, Aaron told me this was an epidemic. Remember, average does not mean normal, and normal does not mean average. Average means they did a sample size. This is where most guys in the US are falling right now. That doesn't mean that's normal. It means that's just what's happening right now. And hopefully we're finding a way to address it, because it's only getting worse without a little bit of intervention. That's what I wanted to talk about with you this week, just to give you a little more information. I think next week we're probably going to talk more about clinics in general. If you've decided that this is something that you want to do, something you want to explore, what do you do? Like, how do you find a clinic? How do you know if it's a good one? How do clinics operate? Why should you go to a clinic maybe instead of just going and asking your doctor or trying to get your insurance to pay for it? Like, why not go that route? And there are answers to all of that stuff. I think that's probably what I'll go into next week. For now, I hope that this was helpful to you. Like I said, if you want to do a double click or a deep dive into what I talked about and maybe even go even a little more thorough, you can go ahead and get this guide. It's the Testosterone Ultimate Guide, everything you always want to know about testosterone, but we're afraid to ask, is what it's actually called. And that's on our website, olympusmen.com. Just scroll down to the bottom and you'll see in the footer there, it has the option to download the free guide. All right, my friends, that's all for now. Have a fantastic week. I hope I was able to give you at least a little more information on what I'm talking about and the direction that I'm heading in, and at least some stuff to think about. Even if this isn't something that's for you, like at least you're aware of it right now and that it's a thing and that it's probably only going to become more and more prevalent. So hopefully people start talking about it a little more. All right, I will talk to you soon, my friends. Have a fantastic week. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Storied Coaching with Aaron J. Jacobs. If you want more information or resources from the podcast, visit us at storiedcoaching.com.